Please stand by. We're about to begin. Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's workshop on site management tools and practice. This session will be recorded. If you experience technical difficulty, please press *0 for assistance. Now I would like to direct the audience to force their screen to full view by pressing the small icon located in the bottom right corner of your screen. You are looking for a blue box with arrows pointing out from the corners. Please click that icon now to bring the presentation to full view. At this time, I'll turn the podium to Liz Buttry.
Hi, welcome everybody. I am Liz Buttry, the training coordinator for the Clinical Coordinating Center. I'd like to take a moment once again to thank Frankie Kropp and Gloria Mealy for presenting for us today. Today's session will be part 2 of the 3-part workshop series on site management. Please be sure to register for the final session on May 7th. Email invitations will be distributed to you soon to enable your auto-registration by simply clicking reply in the email. Now I'll turn things over to Frankie Kropp. Frankie?
Thanks, Liz, and hi, everybody, and welcome back. It's good to see everybody on the list again, and appreciate the fact that you guys have decided to join us for session 2. Just to let you know what we're going to do today, we're going to spend just a little bit of time talking about some logistical stuff in regards to study pre-initiation. We'll cover just fairly quickly a little bit about that. But the bulk of the session today is going to be talking about team building and managing positive communication and effective feedback within your study team. That'll be a very interactive session, and I think something a little bit different than you might be used to, and I think we'll have a lot of fun with that. So I know I'm looking forward to that. But first, let's get started by talking a little bit about study pre-initiation, and specifically we are going to be looking at some tasks, some tools, and some methods of tracking. And before we get into that, I want to bring up a little survey here. So I'm just going to click on this. And what we want to know is, in addition to project management, what other primary role do you play at your node? And this would be your primary role. So go ahead and put your votes in. Okay, so it looks like we have a fair percentage of people on the call actually who do some quality assurance work as well as project management, and a few trainers. That's probably, oh, there's another one. I was going to say that it was probably me, Gloria, and Liz. A few administrative and finance people, a couple of regulatory folks, a couple of folks who really their primary job is strictly project management. And then we have some others, quite a few others. Liz, is it possible that we could open up the lines and just kind of get a feel for who these others are?
And all lines are open?
So if some of you that marked other, could you give us a sense of what other primary role you play at your node?
Supervisor.
Like a site supervisor?
Yes.
Okay. Who else?
This is Teresa in Cincinnati. I'm a therapist also.
Okay. What other kinds of others do we have out there?
Study coordinators.
Study coordinators, okay.
Yeah, we're at TRI. There's project coordinator, action coordinator, and another high-level scientist.
Ah, okay, great. Well, I think we can go ahead and close the line back up. Thanks. I just wanted to kind of get a feel for that because what we're going to be talking about is how the project manager interfaces with all of these different other members of the team as we go into the pre-implementation process. So let me go back to the slides now. So although you as a project manager, or at least in your project manager role, even though maybe you do play some of these other roles, the project manager piece that you play will not be directly responsible for completing all of those tasks associated with each member of the study team. You are, though, responsible to ensure that all members of the team are working together efficiently and within the time frame that's laid out for the study. So throughout this process, the project manager ensures good communication among the study team, and you're regularly going to report to the principal investigator on your progress. At minimum, this involves checking in with the various team members frequently, but sometimes the project manager even plays a direct role in assisting team members in completing their tasks. And we talked a little bit about this last time where we talked about, for example, with the administrative folks that you might gather as a project manager, you might gather some of the pieces that will help them figure out, how many of each kind of staff need to be hired, and you might help them by, gathering up information on what supplies need to be done. In assisting the regulatory staff, you might be the one that comes to them and says, here are the different materials that we need for this particular study. How much of this has to go through the IRB? So you might actually be working with them to co-develop some of the materials or the different kinds of procedures for this study. So it really has to be a strong coordinated effort, and the project manager is going to play a key role in coordinating that. This is true for both the lead project manager and the local project manager. So at either level, you're going to play a key role in coordinating this. But for the purposes of the training today, I'd like to just focus primarily on the local project managers, and we'll briefly look at these areas one by one. So let's first look at pre-implementation tasks as they pertain to the regulatory staff members. Again, your role is not to perform the regulatory function. Even if you are also the regulatory person, you kind of wear two hats. And so as the project manager hat, you're not necessarily going to do the same thing as you would when you're wearing your regulatory hat. But you are going to ensure that the regulatory process for the study goes smoothly and that it's coordinated with the rest of the study functions. And so in order to accomplish this, you should meet with the node regulatory person to determine what assistance is needed in order to take care of all of the regulatory requirements. And you should have some sense of this. If you remember from our first session, we talked about that protocol checklist where you went through and you identified some areas that might be of concern that you might have to look more closely at in terms of the regulatory process. So in that project planning piece, you identified the areas. Now here you are in the pre-implementation piece, you're actually going to take steps to address those areas and make any changes or additions or procedures that are going to be required to actually address those issues that you looked at up front. Also, in your handouts, you have a document that's called Session 2 Regulatory Process Guidelines, and I'm going to bring that up on the screen so we can look at that together. This was a document that was put together by Emily Dorer, who is the Regulatory Director for Ohio Valley Node. And she did this to help our project managers here in Ohio Valley know when a new study is about to begin, what is the list of questions and issues that we need to consider where she's going to need our input in order for her to do our job. Emily, I know you're on the phone, so I just want to publicly thank you. I think this is a really great document. And again, this is in the clinician or the project manager toolbox. so that you all can look at that and use it as a template to make something similar in your node. But I just want to go through it for a minute to see the kinds of things that you might be asked for by your regulatory person. So one of the things that we have to decide is which IRB is going to review this protocol. Now here in Cincinnati, we have a medical IRB and we have a behavioral IRB. And so we have to look at the kind of study it is. Is it strictly a behavioral? Are there medications involved? Is it some kind of a combination of that? We also have to look at if the VA is going to be involved. Then not only do we have to involve the UC IRB, but we're also going to have to involve the VA Research and Development Committee, which is similar to an IRB here. And so we're going to have to help, I as a project manager would have to help Emily know what are all the elements of the study so that she can determine which IRBs have to be involved. She might need to know the funding source, where the study is going to take place. If it's in a community treatment program, she'll need to know, does that community treatment program already have an IRB associated with it? Or is that something that she's going to have to help them set up and get them under the UC IRB umbrella? What's the timeline for starting the study? Obviously, you know, as we talked about last time, IRBs sometimes are not the fastest processes in the world. And so we want to make sure that Emily's aware of, or your regulatory person is aware of the timeline for starting the study. In Section 2, she tells us what she needs to have for IRB submission. She needs to know who the staff are, whether they have the proper credentials, have they completed all of the IRB required trainings, not necessarily the study required trainings, but the IRB required trainings. She's going to need to know what kind of documents were provided from the lead node. Were there any templates for the consent form? Were there advertisements? Were there information sheets? Are there any specific assessments that are going to have to be put before the IRB? And again, we may have these come to us from the study sponsor or the lead node, or we may find that your project manager and your regulatory person need to get together to design these for the study at the local level. Other kinds of questions is there going to be a certificate of confidentiality? If so, who is going to obtain the certificate? Is there an IND that's involved? Now, in the CTN, I think that's less of an issue than it is if you're doing say a pharmaceutical trial, but in some cases you might have to think about that. We need to know the contact information so that we can pass that on to our regulatory person. And we need to know the whole issue of the regulatory binders. What's going to be expected at the site? Is our regulatory person expected to set up the regulatory binder, or is some template going to be provided to us, or is the sponsor actually going to send us a binder with tabs that all we have to do is fill? And then the other things that your regulatory person might need to know is what their role is in terms of who's going to handle the process for the IRB submission. In most cases, that's going to be your regulatory director, but it might vary depending on your site. And so Emily here has provided some information for the project managers so that not only do we have to give her information as to what we're doing, she now in this last section is giving us some information as to what her process is and what we can expect of her as she works through the regulatory process. So it's really a nice little sheet, and you might want to think about working with your regulatory person at your node to provide something like that for the project managers, because it's really very helpful. Okay. So again, thank you for that, Emily. In case you don't know, Emily Dorr is the same person as Emily DeGarmo. She recently got married, so she has a new last name. All righty. the trial performance management in CTN has really taken an evolving course over the past several years, and those of you who have been in the CTN for a long time are really aware of how things have changed. More recently, the idea of monitoring at the local site has been less of an emphasis, although that seems to be, for the near future, gaining some focus, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But when the Clinical Coordinating Center came in, the focus of quality assurance really kind of moved to them rather than the local node. And so the whole idea of managing the study and checking the binders for accuracy and ensuring that the study staff was performing the study procedures appropriately really kind of fell into this role called a trial performance management. And in some nodes, the trial performance management is just one person. That is, you have one person who is managing the study site for the node, interacting, kind of overseeing and supervising. But you also have that person also kind of serving as a study monitor who's going in and looking at the charts and although they didn't do this early on, now they're kind of moving toward that person going in and checking the source documents against the database. And in some nodes, like in Ohio Valley, for example, those are very separate functions. When I serve as a project manager, that's what I do, is I serve more as a supervisory, mentoring kind of a role. And we have another person named Sharon who serves as more of the traditional monitoring role at the local level. And certainly this is a different role than the Clinical Coordinating Center monitors play. But still, she goes in and she reviews the binders and she gives feedback to the study team and assists them in, correcting errors and that sort of thing. So one of the things that we need to think about when we look at the pre-implementation of a study is, first of all, is there a formal QA plan that's provided? And if so, what is the role of the local staff? Is there going to be monitoring involved? And if there is, how's that going to play out in your site? And Gloria, if you want to just kind of jump in here, we were talking the other day about this slide, and we were kind of talking about the whole idea of objectivity. So Gloria, would you like to jump in and just kind of talk about a little bit about our discussion the other day?
Sure. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Good to have you all here. What we were talking about was this notion of whether or not the project manager can also serve to do some of the QA monitoring. And we were recognizing that was the way things are more recently set up in some of the nodes and some of the projects. And I started questioning the issue of can that person who is so intimately involved in the day-to-day operations of the study really be able to take an objective look at if everything is being done the way it's supposed to be done. And certainly that person has all of the information in front of them, but personally, when I'm so deeply involved in the day-to-day operations of something, it's really useful to have another set of eyes who may not be as familiar or a little more removed from the day-to-day operations to take a look. It just reminds me of when you write a manuscript. I could be writing this manuscript for days and think it looks really good, but it's really when I let it go and let other people who haven't looked at it yet and come to it with a fresh eye that I'm able to get some feedback, and they're able to see things that I'm not able to see. So we recognize that there are some studies that are not set up to have an external monitor, but we wanted to bring this up as something for you to think about when you're setting up that part of the study.
Right. And I was hoping at this point that we could maybe open the lines for just a minute and have a little discussion about this, because I know that there are some nodes where kind of routinely one person can play both roles. And Joanne, are you on the line today?
I am, Frankie.
I know that in Oregon, you sometimes play a dual role. Would you talk a little bit about this whole issue of maintaining objectivity and how that plays out for you all?
Yeah, certainly. I gave it some thought, and actually, for me, I don't find it difficult to maintain my objectivity. I serve as a local monitor on several studies, and then on the Stage 12 study, I have had both roles. And it actually seems to me to be a great fit. As a monitor, I'm involved with the team meetings that go on when you're planning the study, and so I feel like I've built rapport with staff. I also assist in doing some local GCP training that we do, and moving into the monitor role on this study just felt really natural. And I think one of the reasons is that whether you're the project manager or you're the monitor, you still have the same goals. I mean, you still want the data to be as clean as possible and complete. You still are concerned with safety of the participants, and you just want to do the best study that you can. So for me personally, I don't feel that I've had a problem maintaining objectivity.
Yeah, that helps a lot to think about that, and I think your point about whichever role you're serving, that the goal is the same, I think that's a really good point. I guess, for me, I think about those times when I've gone kind of head-to-head with a local monitor, and because we've seen things so differently. But, obviously it sounds like it works out really well for you, and maybe for other folks out there, too.
Yeah, on our note, I mean, we're really very team-oriented. And so kind of right from the beginning, if we're helping to build that site staff, and we're training and we're mentoring and we're working with them, I feel that then when I go out as a monitor and I find issues, I just feel like we have more of a team rapport, and they don't usually take offense. Usually I say, okay, this is what I'm seeing, and we discuss it, and they may, tell me why they were doing it that way. And it just seems to be a fairly good fit.
Okay, cool. Does anybody else have any thoughts in either direction?
My name is Lynn Calvin, and I'm from the Mid-Atlantic site.
Uh-huh.
And I play QA monitor as well, but I do the QA for an off-site place. It's in the same study as us, but and I think I can maintain objectivity as well because it's not the place that I work every day, even though it's the same protocol.
Uh-huh.
I don't think that I should be allowed to do my own site, but I do think that I'm able to maintain the objectivity when I go to our other site to do the QA for them.
So you kind of swap off maybe?
Yeah.
Okay. That's an interesting way to look at it too.
Mhm.
Because I think Joanne is right. The goals are very, very, very much the same. It's all about let's get the best data that we can get,
exactly.
and certainly even as a project manager, you should be aware of what's going on in the data department. We'll actually talk a lot more about that next time. But yeah, that's interesting. So play both roles, but not necessarily for the same site.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this?
Can you hear me? This is Ed in Delaware Valley.
Oh, hi, Ed. Yeah.
I was thinking about the friction that sometimes happens between the research staff and the clinic staff. And sometimes if you're initializing a site, it's better to have, as a manager, the role of facilitating all of the people at the site and not be grouped into what some people react to as a judgmental process. That I can better stand shoulder to shoulder with the people at the site in trying to figure out how to better do things and to improve things if there is a separate party from me who is doing the actual reviews and being, how should I say, critical, which is very necessary, but my role in the moment and as a team builder has to be focused on how the team is reacting to their imperfections and helping them get past that so that the end result is going to be the same. But I don't know that I can do that and be the monitor at a site that I'm trying to manage.
Yeah, that's a real good insight, Ed, and I hadn't really, as part of this conversation, I hadn't even thought about the whole aspect of the clinic staff, the non-research clinic staff, but you're absolutely right, and we actually are going to talk about that a little bit later, that, those folks have to be incorporated too, and that might be, at least for me, I think that would be more difficult if I were coming in as a monitor. But that's really good information. And it's really, that's one of the nice things about having this kind of a call is we can kind of talk about it and look, we've seen three totally different perspectives as people have talked on this call about this already. And I think for the sake of time, we need to go ahead and shut the line so we can move on. But I really appreciate everybody's input because I think it was a really interesting discussion. So as I said, we'll talk more about the monitoring function next time. And I just wanted to give a little plug for Scott Provost, who is actually going to do a seminar on July the 14th on doing a QA and site monitoring visit. And so those of you that are more involved in the monitoring, I would just encourage you to go ahead and sign up for Scott's seminar. I'm sure that will be very good. Just want to talk about then as, from the QA perspective as a site manager, not looking at the monitoring function, but only the management side of things. We want to make sure that we're aware of what are the expectations of the actual study for how the quality assurance procedures will occur. As I said, for some studies, all of the formal monitoring is done exclusively by the CCC, and local staff just kind of does real informal general reviews. But more recently, we've seen the newer studies, and I know this is true for the one that I'm getting ready to work on, which is C1046. Some of the newer studies are actually returning to a more formal QA role at the node level with local staff providing periodic interim monitoring visits and then reporting on some standardized forms. So it's going to be really important that you as a project manager review what are the study's expectations, and then you work with your PI or your other node QA staff to ensure that the plans are put in place to carry out these procedures. So some of the things to ask include, was there a plan provided? What's the role of the local staff? Will there be formal reports required? And if so, do we make them up at the site, or, are those going to be provided to us? And then we also want to know who will interact with the Clinical Coordinating Center's monitor, and will you, as the project manager, serve as a monitoring function, or will there be somebody separate doing that, or as our person from the Mid-Atlantic talked about, will you be swapping off roles with somebody else if you have maybe two sites in the same study? So in your handouts and in your toolbox, we've placed a trial performance monitoring plan from a current study which has formal expectations. And I'm not going to review that here, but I just want to encourage you to take a look at that to see how you as a protocol manager might use that tool to answer the questions that we've just reviewed. As with previous areas, unless you also are the trainer, the project manager is not expected to be the site trainer, but you should be aware of all the training requirements and ensure that they're successfully completed. Usually the lead team will provide a training plan for you that indicates what training will be provided by them and by the CCC and by the DSC. And usually that training plan will also indicate what training is expected to occur locally. Again, I've put a sample training plan as in the toolbox for you all to look at, so that, if you'd like to pass that along to your site trainers, or for you to look at to see what you might see as a project manager when somebody sends you a training plan from the lead node, and what you can expect. But we're not going to go ahead and cover that here. But the kinds of questions that you want to think about as you look through that training plan are things like exactly what training is going to be expected for your node to provide to your local research staff. And you have to wonder, do you have the local training expertise required? At one time, every single node had multiple trainers for a wide variety of things. But then as money got tight and things were rearranged in the CTN, a lot of those folks either were moved into different roles or even let go. So there are some nodes out there who may be lacking trainers for certain aspects of the study assessments that would be expected to be handled locally. And if that's the case, then you'll have to work with your PI and your training person at your node to figure out how that's going to be provided. You also need to know who is expected to go to centralized trainings, and you'll need to give that information to your budget person and also your business staff, so that they can arrange travel, make travel arrangements for folks. And then you'll have to know, how do you document training completion, and also, is there any job-related training required that's not reflected on the training plan? For example, if the study requires a phlebotomist, and you don't have a phlebotomy staff at your site, you need to think about, are you going to just hire somebody, contract for that, or are you going to provide training for someone else who's already on the study staff in order to perform that function? Again, numerous logistical details in the pre-initiation period that require the project manager to coordinate with the administrative staff, both at the RRTC and at the CTP. So there's lots of decisions to be made regarding things like equipment and supplies. You'll need to know what the site already has, as opposed to what we're going to have to go out and purchase for them. There may be specific accounting requirements for the study staff that are peculiar to the site, for things like petty cash and obtaining participant reimbursements. And we're going to have to work all this out in advance. You have to define the research space. You have to make sure that it's furnished appropriately. And that includes accommodations for the storage of paper study records, regulatory files, study equipment, supplies, that sort of thing. And of course, if the study involves the processing of biological samples or a medical exam, which most of our studies do, then we need to make sure that there are some areas that are uniquely suited for these procedures. We must identify them and equip them and work out a sharing of time, perhaps, with the rest of the clinic. And then finally, and Gloria will actually talk about this a little bit more, but we need to work out with the site what's going to be the role of various non-study personnel. So, for example, the site receptionist may need to be involved in the study at some level, so that he or she can refer inquiries that come in on the phone or maybe walk-ins to the clinic. They will know what's going on, and they can kind of explain it to the person and refer that on to the study staff. And similarly, study staff may need to share lab space with the non-study staff. This was something that we ran into in performing the CTN 30 study out at the East Indiana site. There were only so much lab space, and so when we put in our centrifuge and our refrigerator, we had to make sure that the samples for the study didn't get mixed up with the samples that they draw for the site, and to make sure that we weren't both trying to draw blood in the same space, different things like that. It's really important, and I just want to take just a second and say that maintaining good relations with the rest of the staff at the site is of critical importance to the success of the study. And Ed, you've already brought this up in our talking about QA, that really as a project manager, in some senses, you're not just a supervisor for the study staff, but you're also an ambassador for the study to the clinic staff. And it's absolutely critical if you're going to have your study succeed in a site. It's absolutely critical that you achieve some level of buy-in and cooperation, and that you're really a good neighbor to the other folks at the site who may find that they have an extra burden. You know, maybe they're going to have to deal with extra people walking by their office, or maybe they're going to have to reschedule their use of some rooms, or that they're going to have to maybe answer the phone for you and refer things to you that come in over the general clinic line. So you want to make sure that they know that they're appreciated, and that we keep them in the loop about any study-related issue that might impact them. And again, Gloria will talk about this, I think, a little bit later when we get into talking about teams. And finally, we come to the study staff themselves, not just the RAs, but the interventionists, medical clinicians, phlebotomists, and any other staff members who will be involved in actually implementing some of the study procedures. When we're working with the study staff during pre-implementation, the project manager's job is to make sure that every step of the study is thoroughly planned out, and that the study team is both competent and confident in their individual role. One of the best ways to ensure that the team has thought through the study process is the development of the local SOPs that will spell out in detail how various aspects of the study will be performed at the site. Now, anymore, usually the lead team will provide study-wide SOPs in the form of an operations manual, and sometimes in the form of sample SOP templates. But each site is different. So it's really critical that before the study begins, the project manager works with the team and maybe even other members of the clinic to review how each study procedure is supposed to happen, look at the facility and figure out how it actually is going to happen, and then write that plan down on paper. There is an SOP template, and I'll just very briefly show that to you. Let me find it here. Excuse me just a second. There it is. This was created by the old QAS subcommittee a long time ago, but a lot of people who had spent a lot of years involved in quality assurance activities spent a lot of time to develop this template on how to prepare an SOP. And so, again, this is in your toolbox as well as in your handouts. And as you go to build your SOPs during the pre-implementation phase, you might just want to take a look at this to help you standardize how the look and content of your SOPs are. Other kinds of things that you're going to want to develop other than the SOPs, there might be some local forms that have to be developed. So things like your site receipts, accounting logs for things like reimbursement, maybe some calibration logs for if you're using a breathalyzer or some other piece of equipment that needs to be monitored. Perhaps your follow-up contact logs that interface with the site, like incident reports for the study. You want to make sure that those are compatible with incident reports for the clinic. And maybe you want to do things like make logs that track which staff in the clinic have actually made referrals to the study. And we've placed several examples of these kinds of things, again, in the toolbox, and encourage you to go there and take a look at those. You also are going to make sure that everything is completed in terms of training. Oftentimes, the lead node will provide a list, kind of a checklist or a report of what's expected for each particular study role, but you're going to need to make sure that before your study staff begins actually implementing the study, that they have completed all of their training requirements. You're going to want to put together a recruitment plan, thinking about things like how many people per month is your target. Are you going to recruit from in-house versus recruiting from the community at large? Are you going to use free types of recruitment like flyers, posters, networking, that kind of thing, as opposed to paid advertisements, newspaper, radio, television, that kind of thing. So you want to put together, again, a recruitment plan that fits best for your particular site. And then finally, a really key element to preparing the study staff for pre-implementation is rehearsal. And that means a total walkthrough of each procedure in the study multiple times with people acting as if they are actual study participants. You know, keep in mind, practice makes perfect, but it also points out bugs in the system up front, and so you really, really want to make sure you're paying attention to that. As you can see, this is an enormous amount of stuff to keep on top of. So it's really critical to develop a system of tracking all the different things that have got to be accomplished prior to initiation. And so because of this, you want to develop some kind of a system that works for you. I'm going to bring up a sample here, and it's loading. And this is just my particular pre-initiation checklist as the protocol manager for our local site in CTN 30. And as you can see, I'm not going to read through every item, but it's 18 pages long. And what I did here to get ready was I listed everything that needed to be in the regulatory binder, and then, you know, checked things off as they occurred. Other kinds of regulatory issues, I made sure that all of my staff were signed on the staff responsibility logs, that I had their resumes or CVs, that we had their DEA certificates for the doctors, that we had a DEA power of attorney for the person who was ordering the medication, the training records, conflicts of interest, other kinds of IRB-approved materials, that we had our staff, who our staff were, that they were both identified and hired, the training, each individual training element, kind of going through, that we developed a recruiting plan, and that we had other kinds of supplies on hand for recruitment, our quality assurance plan, all of the things that are supposed to be sent to EMIS before initiation, you know, that those got faxed or sent in, that we had our data stuff set up, that we had our documentation, our binders, our study supplies, our equipment, all of these various things, our laboratory contract, our site subcontract with the site. So all of these sorts of stuff that you as a project manager may have to think about, are they done? And again, you might not be the one actually doing them, but as a project manager, you really need to track to make sure that this stuff is being done. So we've put several examples, again, in the toolbox for you. Some are in Excel, some are in Word. And the trick is that you need to include a level of detail that fits your personal needs. You don't want to make a tool that's so general that, you know, it really doesn't track the steps toward progress. But you also don't want to create a tool that's so complicated that you'll never really use it. And you want to make sure that you include some way to indicate deadlines that correspond to the deadlines in the study timetable. Once all of this is in order, then the final step is endorsement. And several sources will occur that will confirm that the preparations have been completed. So once your site is ready to begin, the Clinical Coordinating Center will come do a site visit, report on your site readiness, You as a project manager will work with your study staff to ensure that any problems that are still outstanding are resolved. And then once your site's ready to go, your node PI will initiate the endorsement form. That then goes usually to the lead node, and then to NIDA, and then NIDA will actually issue the endorsement. And then once endorsement's obtained, then you're able to begin the recruitment process. That's really all I wanted to do. There's a lot of content here, but most of it really can be obtained by looking at the various handouts. So again, just if there's anything here in the pre-initiation process that felt like I just moved through it too quickly, just go into LiveLink, into the toolbox, and take a look at all those forms, and just think about how you might use those to help you track next time you go to implement a study in your node. At this point, I'm going to hand off to Gloria, and as Rocky the Flying Squirrel would say, now here's something you'll really like.
Well, thanks, Rocky. I forget what Bullwinkle would say back, but anyway, hi everybody. We are a little less than halfway through, so if you're able, I'd like to invite you to stand up and stretch a little bit and get ready for the second half of our training. It's always good to move around, and I read somewhere recently that people learn best in 20-minute chunks. And I think intuitively when we prepare these trainings, we try to open the lines for discussion and do some interactive things and change things up so that we do break the material into some chunks. So here's my form of a break for everybody, just to stand up and give yourself a little stretch and get ready to move along to something hopefully you will really like. So what I'd like to talk to you about for the rest of our time, and Frankie's going to jump in and we want others to jump in as well, is how the project manager really is a team leader. And in the CTN, the key really is good teamwork, and we've already heard that alluded to by Joanne and Ed. And as a project manager, you're going to be leading a diverse team. And we already saw all the different elements and categories of people who work on these studies: regulatory, QA training, study staff, administrators. The concepts of teamwork and team building have taken hold in corporate settings as leadership styles have shifted from command and control models to collaboration and teamwork models. And I think the CTN really is a good example of a collaborative team environment. So we're going to take a closer look at the definitions and features of effective teams and what the project manager can do to facilitate team building within the CTN. So first of all, we're just going to look a little bit at what are teams? What's the nature of teams? Well, first of all, teams have an overall purpose. In our case, data collection for a clinical trial. Everyone is accountable to their peers, the supervisors, the lead investigators, and ultimately the CCTN and NIDA. Our work products are collective. It's like pieces of a puzzle that fit together to make a whole. All of those pieces that Frankie was talking about are all essential in the team to get the work done that we need to get done. Our leadership is also shared. So you'll be the project manager, but there are other people who also have leadership roles. And also it's good to delegate tasks so that everybody gets their needs met and everybody has a part in being a leader. A cohesive team, one that's bonded toward a common goal and works well together, will really result in greater accountability and productivity. So we want to create cohesive teams in our work. And finally, the success of a team is not dependent on one person, but on the whole team. Again, these pieces of the puzzle that come together to make a really nice whole. So there are some different stages of team development, and there's stages for all different kinds of things, and these are the stages of team development. But what I want to do first is a little team building exercise that will give you an idea of what you might want to do in the team forming stage of development. So everybody's going to have an opportunity to participate, and we have some volunteers who are going to share their what they come up with in this exercise with us, and anyone else who wants to share would be more than welcome to hear from you as well. So we would like people to think about introducing themselves by saying your name and adding an adjective that says something about you and starts with the same letter as your first name. This is a way that we're going to learn something about each other and also start thinking about what characteristics might be applicable to our team. So, for example, I am Gleeful Gloria, and I tend to have a pretty positive attitude and a good sense of humor, and I think that is a strength that I bring to a team, and it helps bring people together, and I keep things light but still focus on the work that I do. So, Frankie.
Yes, mine's easy. I'm Frankie. And I'm Frank because I focus on good, clear team communication. And no matter what's going on, I want people to be upfront and open about it and put the issues on the table so that we can work in a problem-solving way to work through these. So that frankness, that openness of communication is really a strength that I think I bring to the teams that I work on.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. We have some people who said that they might like to share their name or their exercise here. So can we open up the phone lines? And just go ahead and introduce yourself and give us your name with your adjective and tell us how that, what that speaks to in terms of your participation in a team.
This is
Hi.
with the Southwest Nose in Albuquerque.
Hi.
Hi, and I would say I'm respectful of different situations. I'm in communication with the project manager and the regulatory, and I'm QA, so I'm very careful in what I present, and I like to listen a lot, but I'm very respectful of what a person tells me.
Okay, respectful Roberta. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Who's next? I heard a male voice speak up.
Male voice. This is egoless Ed.
Egoless?
Egoless, yes. When I'm successful, my ego doesn't get in the way, and the only times that I really put my foot in my mouth is when my ego is there instead of the common goal of the team.
Very nice. Good self-awareness. I like that. Thank you, Ed. Striving for egolessness. All right, who else?
I'd have to go for jovial Jennifer. There's not too many J adjectives that I could think of on the moment. I like to keep the spirit light to make our meetings go well and for everyone to get along. And I feel a real camaraderie with the teams that I work with. I like that my boss doesn't ask things of me that he wouldn't do, and I certainly wouldn't ask things of my RAs that I wouldn't do. The more of us who know the job, the better we can serve our clients.
Great. So you got a good attitude, and your work situation is really comfortable, and you're able to keep things light.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, jovial Jennifer. Anyone else?
I'll say loyal Lynn.
Uh-huh.
I don't stay at my site too often because I'm working on other studies. However, my team knows that if they need me, they can access me on my cell phone, or
they can send me an email and they know that it will be answered that day. So they really can feel very comfortable knowing that if they need me, I'm there for them.
That's great. Loyal Lynn. So there at a moment's notice. We're going to talk about work-life boundaries in the next session, Lynn, but I think that's great that you're so available if people need you, so that's terrific. So we're going to take one more in the interest of time.
Gloria, this is Christy. I have one.
Okay.
I would say collaborative Christy. And I say collaborative because I'm very sensitive to the nature of our work and that it really is a partnership. And so I think what I try to bring to each interaction is one of kind of respect for others' views and opinions and really trying to be resourceful and to work really as a unit in cooperation and collaboration. So that's at least my philosophy and what I attempt to have as my orientation.
Nice. And so you could even get cooperative Christy in there.
Yeah. If I can do a two-person.
Excellent. Thank you. So you see, what we start to do by doing an exercise like this, and we can go ahead and close the phone lines now. Thank you, everybody. So you can see, this really serves a number of purposes. One, we start getting familiar with people's names. Because a lot of times you come into a group, you're getting a new team together, and you want everybody to get familiar with each other pretty quickly. So an exercise like this, first of all, helps people learn each other's names because you're saying your name over and over. You're associating an adjective with that name, which helps reinforce the name recollection. But also you're learning about that person. You're learning about the other people on the team, their self-assessment of what they bring to the team. And as the project manager, you're starting to think, what role might I have this person play on my team based on what I would call, at this point, their strengths, what they're saying that they really bring to the team. So I'm thinking, I might talk to Frankie about giving feedback when needed. Because there are some people who are not as comfortable giving feedback. We're going to talk about giving feedback. But, I want Frankie, who's comfortable with it, who wants to do it, who sees that that's her strength. I want her to be a person who's going to come in there and give feedback and be straightforward and be collaborative. I'm going to want maybe in some of these more sensitive situations, maybe I would want Roberta to go in there and make sure that she can navigate some more sensitive situations. And, if I want somebody who is going to be a really reliable backup to call when you need something answered, maybe I would have Lynn do that because that's something that she identifies with. So you start building your team, people start getting to know each other, and you start getting a good sense of who the members of your team are. So there are a lot of team building exercises out there. That's, one of many. Frankie likes to use one about your favorite cartoon character, right, Frankie?
Right.
And, who's your favorite cartoon character and how do you identify with that cartoon character? And that's always fun. And there are a ton of websites and materials that you can use. There's one website that I use that's really good. It's called teachmeteamwork.com. And that's a coach and a team building expert who has a lot of materials for free on his website. And there are books and all kinds of things. So think about doing some kind of fun, interactive activities with your team, and depending upon what stage of team development, you would use different kinds of team-building exercises, again, depending upon what you want to focus on. But it could be fun and something different to bring to your team. So some of the other stages of steam development, I saw storming and said steam development, team development. Storming is basically when people start getting to know each other and they start clashing a bit. And that's normal. When people start getting to know each other and really trying to figure out what their role is on the team, there might be some conflict, some jockeying for positions, competing for status and bumping up against each other. But that's going to pass as there's more of the norming of the team, as people have become more clear about their roles and really start pulling together as those roles are established and the objectives become really clear. As the team matures and learns how to work together and address and solve complex problems, that's the performing phase. And then there's, the work is done. We're all working for that goal to finish the study, and then the team could disband. Okay, so those are just some basics of team development. So what creates a successful team? And again, I think we've already been hearing this from comments people have been making. It's really important to have a supportive environment. And that really has a lot to do with effective communication. We're going to be talking about that a little bit later. Flexibility is important to create a supportive environment, as well as having opportunities for team members to get to know one another like we just did. People need to start thinking like a team, and even a little bit of time spent connecting personally can go a really long way and get people thinking like a team. Now, knowing the other roles that people have is really critical. That doesn't mean you have to do them, but you need to understand what other people have to do. That gives you more respect of the other people on the team and more realistic expectations of their roles. And also, it helps you then to manage people by serving as a backup if you need to. Now, thinking like a team also requires a focus on the goals and objectives. Having a vision and intermediate goals to get there really helps solidify your team's purpose. And then you want to use some rewards, even doing some of these fun activities in a meeting. That in and of itself could be a reward when people are sometimes become accustomed to sitting in meetings that are not so inherently rewarding. But there's other rewards you can use as well. Food is always a good one. I think that's a universal team builder, is having a snack or sharing a meal together. And then, again, providing regular opportunities for people to interact. Those are all going to help you build your team. Now, I want to talk about a concept that I've gotten very interested in really in the past 6 months or so, and this is this concept of positivity. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this book, but in the past couple of months, it came out at the beginning of 2009, a psychologist and a research psychologist named Barbara Fredrickson published a book called Positivity. She has been doing research on positive emotions for the past 10 to 15 years, and she basically boiled down her research and the research of others who've been studying emotions and put them into this very accessible, very motivating, and very kind of heartwarming book called Positivity, How to Increase the Positivity in Your Life and the Effect that that has on productivity, creativity, and happiness. So basically, I mean, we're all researchers here, so I'm not going to get too bogged down in the details. But basically, in her research, she induces either positive, negative, or neutral emotions, then has participants perform some kind of cognitive task or some other task. And over again, she finds that a positive emotional state, even a subtle one, makes people more open to experience and more creative in their thinking. She has this one colleague at Cornell, Alice Eisen, has done this kind of work with physicians, and she's looked at two groups of physicians. One group got basically a little bag of candy, and the other physicians did not. That group who got the little bag of candy reported like a mild, positive emotional state. After they got this bag of candy, they were presented with a case study of somebody who had some problem with liver disease. The group of physicians who got like just a small token that increased their positive state had much more I lost my place. They integrated the information in a case more quickly. They were less anchored to the initial thoughts as they began discussing the case, and they were less likely to come to a premature closure than the doctors in the group who did not experience the positive emotions beforehand. So what's the moral of the story? Bring candy to your doctor before you go if you're having a problem. But no, it's the moral to you could do that too. But the moral really is that even a slight emotional state, she's got this broaden and build theory. Positivity broadens your perspective and helps you move forward in your life and build your cognitive state and be more effective in the things you do. This study was replicated with team leaders, with salespeople, and always similar results that when you induce a positive state, people think in a more creative and broader way. Now, this also applies to teams. Fredrickson also talks about this positivity ratio. So it's not this Pollyanna thing where you just have to put on a happy face and be, happy and positive and smiling all the time. It really, she has seen, again, in her research that there's a ratio, a pretty exact ratio of 3 to 1, positive to negative. If you've got 3 positive emotional experiences to 1 negative emotional experiences, that predicts how people flourish, people's true heartfelt sense of happiness and satisfaction in their lives. Really powerful stuff. If you couldn't tell, I really recommend you check out this book, available on Amazon. Very popular book, Positivity by Barbara Fredrickson. Now, also this notion of positivity has been applied to teamwork. And there have been studies that have shown that positive communication is a hallmark of high-performing teams. So these have been studies of organizations who are considered high-performing based on profits, employee satisfaction, customer satisfaction. So looking at a range of different variables that would call an organization high-performing versus low-performing. And in study after study, when looking at the meetings that are part of these organizations, like yearly staff meetings, high-performing teams have a substantially greater ratio of positive to negative comments within a meeting. So, and in fact, to the tune here of 6 to 1, not just 3 to 1, 6 to 1. 6 to 1 positive to negative statements. So the statements would be things like, we've done a great job, let's talk about our successes, what have we been doing well, how have we been succeeding. Very little time spent on what is not working, on what the failures were. The time is mostly spent on focusing on the positive. And there's a very clear relationship between those kinds of positive attitudes and the performance of an organization. So it's a very long speech because I'm so excited about this area of research to really bring home how our communication and how our positivity can really impact the work that we do and the people who we work with. So I want to get a little survey going here because I realize it's been about 20 minutes, so we've got to do a little something. All right, I'd like you all to answer this question. At work, I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. Go ahead and answer. We're mostly not. I think we have most participants have answered. And this is fantastic. We are basically, as a group, the vast majority strongly agree that they have the opportunity to do what they do best every day in their job. We have some neutrals. We only have one who strongly disagrees. That is great. And that, I think, speaks to the success of a lot of the projects that happen at the CTN. And I'm going to talk to you about how important it is. We can go ahead and close that poll. How important it is for people to be using their strengths on a daily basis. Technical issues. Got it. So not only do we want to come to our jobs with this notion of positivity, but we also want to think about people's strengths and use a strengths-based approach to project management. Another writer who I've been reading a lot of in the past year is Marcus Buckingham. And we have a little thing where we can have a show of hands. I'm sure there is, but I figured that out beforehand. But people might be familiar with Marcus Buckingham. He is he works for the Gallup organization, and he writes books about using your strengths. He wrote Now Discover Your Strengths, and recently another Gallup person named Tom Rath wrote a book, Strength Finder 2.0, and it's this book that you can purchase, and it has a quiz that goes with it, and it's really a pretty extensive test, and it tells you your 5 signature strengths. What Buckingham talks about, though, is using your strengths versus using your weaknesses. And strength is not only what you're good at, but it's also what energizes you and what makes you strong. And on the other hand, weaknesses is not necessarily what you're bad at, but what kind of depletes you, what does not appeal to you, and you feel like it's a huge struggle to do it every day. Now, obviously, there are parts of our jobs that are difficult and that deplete us and that we don't want to do. But the trick is to, and with yourself and with your team, what we saw even with that little team building exercise that we did, we can start identifying what are people's strengths and try to get them to play to their strengths in the roles that they have in our team. So that survey question that you just did is a question that Gallup has used with more than 10 million people worldwide on the topic of employee engagement. Out of 10 million people worldwide, only 1/3 strongly agree with the statement, at work I have the opportunity to do what I do best every day. We did better than that. I think we were at about 40%. And in general, I think we were in the 70s for both of those poll questions, agree to strongly agree. In a recent poll, Gallup found that those who strongly disagreed or disagreed with this what I do best statement, not one single person was emotionally engaged on the job. Gallup studies also indicated that employees who do have the opportunity to focus on their strengths every day are 6 times as likely to be engaged in their jobs and more than 3 times as likely to report having an excellent quality of life in general. So you can see the importance of using your strengths and having the people who work for you use their strengths as well. So we want to think about how we're going to use this strengths-based approach, and we're going to open up the lines to answer any questions and to also see how people might have used a strengths-based approach in their project management. So can we open up the lines?
Okay, and all lines are open.
Thank you.
This is Linda in Oregon, and one of our RAs is a pharmacy tech, and so for the CTN30 study, she took all of the medication part and handled that with incredible grace and skill and accuracy and dealt with it through her strength.
Fantastic. That's great. And just finding that kind of match and really working with that can really have a great impact. Thank you. There's somebody who had a question. Does somebody have a question? Roberta, did you want to talk about how you guys look at strengths in New Mexico?
Sure. We have some staff that we can keep here with the RTC, and it's really helpful because I can, as a supervisor, I can see what they're best at, if they're best at recruiting or as an RA, and it's really helped to give them strengths and give them positive information. And sometimes they might not work out as an RA, but they're really good at the recruitment, so I can move them around. And we're able to do that here because we can keep some of the staff on several projects.
So that's a real kind of a special situation. Some nodes are able to do that, others are not. But if you are able to do that, then you kind of have this set of people who you're able to choose from and really assign to what they do best. And even in our last session, we were talking about the possible need for recruiters and locators and how they're different people. They're people with different kinds of strengths. So to be able to work with people on a longer-term basis and get a sense of what they do best and to be able to assign them to those kinds of projects, that's really that's a great way to go.
Hello?
Yes.
Hi, this is Steve from the New England node. We had a situation where we're in CTN 32, and our research coordinator at our site left, and a research assistant filled in. And while we were looking for a research coordinator, and after a while, the node coordinator and I agreed, why should we look any further? So, because she was highly organized and really on top of everything, and so she got promoted to the coordinator position.
That's great. Somebody who already had, was already familiar with what was going on, and then you saw how organized she was and what she was able to bring to the team to that higher level. And you didn't even have to look outside.
Right.
That continuity, continuity and the reason I mentioned that employee engagement, everybody knows, and I think we've probably all come up against that problem of staff turnover and how disruptive that could be to a study and to getting things done and how that can really hold us up. So to be able to help people focus on their strengths and keep them highly engaged with what they're doing really will help us all out in the long run.
This is Beth in Philadelphia, and at Treatment Research Institute. And the other thing that I do is sometimes this portion of the job may be boring at a particular part in the study, if there's a lot of data cleaning or things like that in between engagement. And so I try and figure out for RAs, what they want to do next, and try and get them involved in either papers or giving them training and something that let them help me do training, or doing something that I think would enhance their future. They're engaged in their position, even if a lot of the day-to-day tasks might be more boring at that point in the study.
That's another great approach. So giving them further opportunities beyond whatever, the task may be, the task is what it is, and it may not be very exciting, but to be able to carve out some time that really serves kind of as a reward for what they're doing, and then giving them something more interesting that they can kind of sink their teeth into. That's great. That's great. So I'm going to move along here. I think in the interest of time, I'm just going to move along. We talked a little bit about this already. What are the guidelines for setting your team up? Who's going to perform what roles? We've already talked about how to determine that based on people's strengths and then also based on the needs of the protocol. And how do we resolve conflict? And we're going to get to that as we talk more about feedback. Frankie, did you want to briefly share some issues that have come up in team building?
I guess I just want to share a lesson learned from working with a different culture. One of the things that we're participating in right now in Ohio Valley is the CTN 33 project, which is occurring in a number of nodes. It's not all exactly the same protocol. But what this entails is building relationships with American Indian communities and performing some very elementary research in those communities. One of the really strong lessons that we learned from that is in that culture, the task is much less important than the person. And before you can do anything in the Native American communities, at least in the ones that we're engaged in the Northern Plains, there has to be a relationship there. And so we have spent a great deal of time just learning about folks and letting them know who we are and coming to trust each other. And I think taking that road, although perhaps that was maybe a little slower process than it would be in a CTP that you're already familiar with, I think there's some transfer of lesson there that, when you go walking into a CTP, maybe they're from essentially the same culture as you, maybe they're working on the same population as you're working with, but take a minute to get to know folks and not just jump right on into the tasks and start working, but really have a sense of developing a connection there and forming the team from a relationship standpoint, not just a task standpoint. So I think that's all I really want to say about that.
Thanks. I think it's just a great example of how you need to know who you're dealing with and what the different culture is, and be open and receptive to that as a part of building your team and getting some buy-in. So we're going to move on to the issue of virtual teams, and I think we have all become very familiar with this concept because we work from all over the country, and in the past 10 years, this has become more and more of the norm, where people work together but from a remote location. I mean, here we all are. We're all part of the CTN, and we're all participating in this training, and we're all over the place. So it happens all the time. And our virtual teams are working all over the country. Now, the degree to which this affects your job as the project manager really depends upon your role on the team. But regardless of your role, you are part of the virtual team of the CTN and the others related to your protocol. And we've got the CCTN and MS and the Data Management Center, the lead node to the participating nodes, and the local node to the CTPs. If you're working locally, you certainly have more opportunities to meet face-to-face, but there's always going to be people are going to be working in a dispersed manner. We have to figure out how we can all work together without being in the same room in the best way possible. So we all know about the different technologies that we use and the different methods, and that we rely on conference calls, webinars like this, and emails and things like LiveLink to keep us all together as opposed to traditional face-to-face interactions. So how do you get the most out of your virtual team? Well, you need a really good plan, and the SOPs will give you that plan overall, but you also need to evaluate how much interaction is needed with your virtual team. Your conference calls should not provide the opportunity for most of your staff to catch up on their Facebook pages or play Spider Solitaire. We've all been there. We could take some time and open the lines and find out what everybody's favorite game to play is while on a conference call, but we won't do that today. We could do that offline if people have good suggestions. Anyway, calls should really be as interactive as possible. What are some ways that we can make conference calls more interactive? Let's open the lines and see what ideas people might have. Are the lines open?
And the lines are open.
Thank you.
This is Emily from the Ohio Valley Node. One way may just be to mix up, like if you've got a lot of stuff at the lead to present, mix it up so you're not talking consistently and then very little input till like the end of the call.
Okay. So breaking things up to get more input as the call goes on.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Great. From Philadelphia, I think having an agenda ahead of time and letting people know where they're going to be able to have input so they come more prepared and thoughtful.
Great, having an agenda and having it clear on the agenda where you're going to want people's input.
And planning for different people to check in on their area, if that's going to be useful.
This is Roberta. I say that having an agenda, but also going back and going over your minutes and making sure everything was completed from your last meeting, and then moving forward on that next day, for the next week.
So it sounds like that that would really be a very good way to provide continuity.
Yes.
Yeah, because I think that's a really good point. I think what happens a lot of times, people might miss a call, or they forget what happened on the last call, so they feel like they're coming in the middle of something. And if you review what happened before, that could increase people's engagement in the call. That's great. A couple of other things you could do, I think people have already been talking about this, asking questions, making it more interactive. One thing you could think about, and this is part of the planning that somebody was talking about, is having other people on the call take the lead for different areas of the agenda, and that would obviously be planned out ahead of time. Also, you could send slides for people to review, not just prior to the call, but during the call, so there's something other to look at. And having specific tasks to complete, et cetera. So that's great. We can close the lines down again for a minute. Since face-to-face meetings may occur infrequently, you really need to make them count when you have them. And to make sure, we're dealing with budget deficits, and people are not traveling as much as they used to. So we really need to make these count. And there are sometimes when a face-to-face meeting just is much better, especially when you may be forming a team, it's a great time to have a face-to-face meeting. But oftentimes, like in different trainings, if you really need people to be learning some skills and you want to check their learning of skills, there are some times when having a face-to-face meeting is certainly going to be better. So you want to make those count. And then also, I think we need to still close the phone line. I hear some noise in the background.
Okay. Lines are closed.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
But also, you really need to know your team. And some people are going to perform better in this virtual team environment than others. Some people are more extroverted and need more contact, and you want to get a sense of that, of who on your team may need a little bit more interaction with you, and that may need to check in with you on a more regular basis to really make the virtual team structure most effective. So how do you do virtual team building? Well, we did. We did that exercise with the adjective, and that was kind of fun. We could do that. Also, unless you're using video conferencing, I would also love to see everybody's face. I know I would probably recognize maybe 30, 40% of the people on this call, but I don't have the face to the name thing for many of you. When I first started in the CTN, I was on months and months of training subcommittee calls with dozens of people before a face-to-face meeting where I finally got to put the faces with the names. And I remember it was very difficult for me to follow these disembodied voices who I was having a hard time identifying who they were. Because people don't typically say their name before they speak. But that's one rule that you could try to put into place to solve that problem. But there are some ways where you can make a visual layout of the team. And one thing you do is like a team collage where people send their pictures, and then you have the picture and a face. A fun activity that actually we're going to ask you to do is to create a little avatar or image of yourself. And that could be a picture of yourself. It could be a symbol that kind of represents you. It could be some picture in nature that you love, but that you have some visual representation of a person. So we are going to ask that for the next meeting, and I believe the deadline would be next week, and Liz is going to wrap that up for us at the end and tell you what your assignment is. We would like everybody to create a little visual representation of themselves. And again, it could be your actual picture. There are programs now where you can make a cartoon image of your picture. You could, put a picture of your dog, whatever is comfortable for you. But it certainly helps getting a sense of other people when you're able to get some kind of visual layout of your team. All right, so as I mentioned, some people really miss the face-to-face interaction with their colleagues that takes place in a regular office environment when you drop by somebody's office to chat or meet in a break room. So there are some different ways that we could create kind of a virtual water cooler. There could be chat rooms. You could create a group on LiveLink, or maybe some kind of group on a professional network like LinkedIn, even something like Facebook. If people wanted to do that, LinkedIn is a more professional network. But you can actually set up groups in these environments that are protected, so that you would have to have an invitation to get into that group. But it could be a little more social, a little more interactive, and a way for people to connect, kind of like a chat room but specific for your study staff. Sometimes it's important just to have a chance to connect about a topic that doesn't have to do with recruitment numbers or outstanding data queries. You might also want to invite experts to talk about a topic of interest, run a journal club, or provide other content-rich development activities. And somebody was talking about that as a way to kind of reward staff who might be doing some more tedious work and give them some opportunity to do something that might be more intrinsically gratifying for them. Also, you want to really give people kudos when they deserve it, to keep the energy up of your virtual team. This could be a shout-out in the CTN bulletin when you meet a recruitment goal, or internal highlights of individual achievements, or even interesting events that are happening in part of the team. And those just be extra little ways to connect to people and make them feel part of the bigger picture. All right, so now we're going to move into the project manager as supervisor and mentor. And we've already been talking about that, and people have been talking about their role as a supervisor and mentor in their teams. Basically, as the project manager and as a supervisor, it's planning, directing, monitoring, and evaluating the work of others. You may supervise people directly. You may only serve as an advisor or a mentor to those who are not directly in your node. But that's something that you will find out depending upon your role in your node. You may be more of a mentor to others, or you may be more of a direct supervisor, or you might play both roles. Look at that. So what are some of the tasks of a supervisor and mentor? Well, as the project manager, you need to be clear about the expectations you have of your staff. How often will you meet? What are the expectations for the number of calls made in a week, or the numbers of subjects recruited or screened or interviewed, the amount of data collected? We'll talk a lot more about feedback, but you want to set goals, and you can use the SMART goal acronym. And a lot of people might be familiar with SMART goals, and some may not, but that's an acronym that talks about how goals should be made. So goals should be specific or significant. That's the S. The M is measurable or meaningful. The A is achievable or action-oriented. You want to focus on what it is you want to do. Be realistic and results-oriented. And tangible, trackable, or timely is also another way to see the T in the SMART goals. So you want to be as specific as possible with your goals, as I was saying, like how many subjects per week recruited. You want to make sure that you set a goal that is not so out of the realm of possibilities that it's going to detract people from trying to meet it, or that it's impossible to meet. So it's a handy acronym, and there's actually a link to more SMART goal information and a template that you can use to do your SMART goals that's on this slide. The other thing you're going to do, like I said, we're going to talk more about providing feedback and problem-solving challenges and really empowering others. Giving good feedback requires excellent communication skills, including engaging in active listening, summarizing what is said, and taking a stance of inquiry versus advocacy as necessary. And when you use those good communication skills and help problem solve with people, you're really going to help empower them to do the best job they can. So now we're going to go to another poll. So how comfortable are you in providing positive feedback? Okay, we got the positivity talking here. So we have a lot of comfort providing positive feedback, and it's great to be able to give somebody positive feedback about what they've done, something specific that they've achieved and accomplished. All right, so we've got about 80% very comfortable. And now I have another question for you. How comfortable are you in providing negative feedback?
That was quick.
Yeah, that was quick. So I wonder if that's Frankie up in the red. It's a little harder, and something that we don't talk about a lot, and that it's I think it's something that we can tend to avoid. And so we're going to talk about some different approaches to providing both positive and negative feedback that will hopefully help you move up into at least the somewhat comfortable and even into the very comfortable range with some practice. So thanks for your feedback on that. So here are just some really practical ways of providing feedback. You always want to begin and emphasize positive accomplishments. Try not to say "but" after you give a positive some positive feedback to somebody, because that just takes it all away, right? So you really though want to focusing on positivity, focusing on strengths is always a great way to approach it. You want to keep your feedback simple and succinct. I think one thing that happens when we're giving feedback, people get a little anxious about it, and then they keep talking on and on and on. Try to plan it ahead of time so you know what you're saying, and giving some very simple and targeted feedback. In that same light, you want to focus on facts and behaviors, not as much on your attitudes and feelings, but really what happened, really trying to stay with the specific situation and behaviors that were demonstrated. You would note some areas that need improvement, but really, again, trying to focus on the positive and then problem solving with the person on specific behaviors and how they might be changed. Make sure your feedback is well timed. Respectful Roberta, I think, would tell you to make sure that you're meeting with somebody individually, that you don't give somebody feedback unless you feel like everybody else is going to learn from it, and especially if it's positive. But make sure it's well timed. Don't give potentially harmful feedback in a group of people in a public way. And make sure, if you can do it as soon as possible after a behavior, just kind of the standard contingency management and reinforcement, Psych 101, you want to make sure that your feedback comes as quickly as possible after the behavior that you're giving the feedback on. Also, you want to check in with the person. how they heard what you said to them, and kind of summarize the feedback that you gave. So those are just a few guidelines. And you always want to provide a lot of support and encouragement. Keeping a focus on positivity and strengths will go a long way in providing the supportive and encouraging tone for your staff. Even if something doesn't go well, be sure to express appreciation for the effort or intentions that a person puts into a task. For example, you could acknowledge how difficult it was to handle a challenging situation, then help the staff member figure out how to do it in a different way. A collaborative effort in problem solving can strengthen your relationship with staff, as well as provide a great opportunity to help the person think through options and alternatives that can improve performance. And when performance is improved, be sure to note it and give that positive feedback as well.
Gloria, this is Frankie. Can I jump in for just a second?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. I just wanted to give, as an example, many of you on the call are trained in delivering the CD. And over the years, we've been training the CD, and one of the main characteristics that sets the CD apart from some of the other instruments is that it's built into the instructions that you give positive feedback to the person that you're interviewing, that you give frequent short verbal feedback, maybe less frequent long verbal feedback, task-related feedback. But what I hear from interviewers who are just beginning to use this instrument is that just feels weird. It's odd in your mouth. You know, our society really isn't built on patting people on the back all of the time. And so the only way to get around that is to really practice it. And if you don't practice it, then that's one of the behaviors that is probably the first to drop out as people are learning how to administer the CD. That's the first thing that they stop doing is providing that positive feedback. And it may be the same kind of thing as you're working with teams, that if you're not in a situation where, people are kind of used to giving folks the high fives, that may feel really artificial for you. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. In fact, it probably means that you need to do it even more than you would feel comfortable with, just so that you can introduce that into your behavioral repertoire. And then after a while, it'll feel really natural, just like it does as you're delivering the CD, and will become just a part of what you do. But just wanted to raise that up and say that, for a lot of us, that doesn't come naturally, and we just have to work on it.
Absolutely. It's a great example that I'm sure a lot of people on the call are familiar with. All right, Frankie, why don't you take the next one?
Okay. Well, Gloria asked me to take this slide because I'm like the world's worst at email etiquette. I haven't figured that out yet. I think that's age is part of that. But when you think about feedback, there's really two ways that you can provide it. You can provide it in a written form, and you can provide it in a verbal form. And there's really benefits and challenges to each one of those. When you think about verbal feedback, that's really something that's very immediate, and that's one of the strengths of verbal feedback is that, you can pick up the phone and you can, talk to somebody or catch them as they're performing the behavior. You can immediately, correct any errors or immediately reinforce anything that they're doing that's really, really good. Unfortunately, that's also one of the challenges of verbal feedback is that you may not have the opportunity to really think about what you want to say, particularly if what you're delivering is negative feedback, and it may come out in a way that you really didn't mean for it to, or it may come out with a little more emotion than you meant it to have. The other thing with verbal feedback is that if it's something that's long and detailed, it's fine to talk about it, but if you don't also give them written feedback, they just may not remember all of the details of what you've said. And so that's really the strength of written feedback. So if you're, giving feedback, for example, if you're listening to a tape of somebody performing a study procedure, being able to sit and, section by section, spell out what they did well, what they didn't do so well, you can be really explicit and really help them learn how to incorporate those changes long term, because even after the feedback session is over and they want to kind of remember what it was that you told them to do in that situation, they have a record of that. They can go back and look at that. The other nice thing about written feedback is that you can think about that. Perhaps someone in a study does something that really just pushes your button, and you really feel the need to talk with them about that. And so you know, it's all too easy in our culture to shoot off an email. Doing feedback written rather than verbally means that you can run that by somebody first. You know, give it to a supervisor, give it to a colleague, and say, you know, can you see if when I send this out, is it going to convey the message without really blasting the person? And you know, there's a lot of truth to the old thing of sleep on it. You know, write an email, stick it in the drafts column, and then come back and look at it the next day and decide if that's what you really, really wanted to say. So that's one of the strengths. The other thing, though, is when you're doing those emails, make sure that they convey the tone of voice that you would want them to convey if you were speaking with the person in, you know, as if they were on the phone. I know lots of times folks will write an email and not really think about some of the words that are used, and some words in our culture just come with a little bit more emotional content than other. The other thing is, and if you've received an email from me, you know I'm really bad about this, is just be aware of writing in all caps and using exclamation marks. They might, while you might be wanting to emphasize, if you're young and hip and really kind of into what that means, you might receive that as, gosh, somebody's yelling at me as if I don't know that I should be doing this. So just keep in touch with what you're saying and making sure that the feedback that you provide really, really says and conveys exactly what it is that you're looking for. And even if you're only providing written feedback, make sure that you have an opportunity to review that feedback on the phone after the person's had a chance to receive it, so that you can clear up any misunderstandings that might have come through. Gloria, back to you.
That's great. Thank you, Frankie. And, you know, I think sometimes all caps can be just excitement and lots of exclamation points. But I know that I've received emails where the all caps really does have the experience of somebody yelling at me. So it's just something to be aware of. And I think people have been using email for long enough that either they're very aware of it or they're not aware of it at all. So just something to keep in your awareness as you have to give feedback, especially in virtual teams. There may be more written feedback even than verbal. And here we've already talked about a number of these things, and these are really how to decrease defensiveness when giving feedback. And really, it's about being, having some of the qualities that people have already been talking about as being important to them. Being respectful of other people, genuine and empathic. Egoless would be a good one. Jovial. I'm looking at the descriptors that people had, the adjectives in the team building exercise. Collaborative. All of those qualities that you've talked about in yourself, certainly you could use in giving feedback and helping people decrease their defensiveness when getting it, because it can be uncomfortable to get feedback, especially when it is corrective. So just things to be quite aware of. And this is another model that I learned in a course that I took about how to present negative information. And when you have something to say that you think others won't enjoy hearing, you definitely want to be brief. You want to be collaborative, use carefully worded I statements, and relax by being prepared, as I was talking about before. You also want to understand your own feelings and reactions to the situation, and you can use those to facilitate the communication, and also to have kind of a check on yourself to make sure that you are being more factually oriented, and to kind of keep your emotional tone consistent. So this is a model where you use this IDEA acronym, and the first part of that is the introduction. Describe how you feel about starting the discussion. D stands for description. Describe what happened, again, being behavioral. Explanation. Describe what effect it had on you and others. And then the action. What would you like to take? So you see here we're talking about being specific and descriptive and problem solving, all the things that we've talked about but kind of boil down into this pretty simple model to remember. So we're just going to do a little role play, Frankie and I. Right, Frankie?
Right.
All right. And so, Frankie, I wanted to talk to you about something that's really important to me and to the team.
Okay.
I understand that you've been having some trouble keeping up with your work, that recruitment is actually down at the site, and the data queries that have been coming in have really been piling up.
Well, it's been really busy, and there's just been a whole lot of stuff going on, Gloria.
Absolutely. I know.
Am I in trouble?
Well, no, I just wanted to make sure that we were on the same page of what was going on. I know that the study has been going full steam ahead, and I think it's caught a lot of us by surprise.
Yeah, it's been more work than I expected, that's for sure.
Well, that was one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you, is to see how I could help you with that.
Okay.
And, part of that, we could talk about different ways of managing your time and organizing what you're doing. But I'm thinking for the time being, it might be good for us to check in regularly about your work and what you're accomplishing every day.
Well, I do have some ideas about how I'd like to organize things differently. I don't really, the way we set it up, it's just not really working. So I think I'd like to talk with you about organizing it differently.
That would be great. If you've got some ways of organizing things that are going to work better for you, as long as it's within the realm of the protocol, we can certainly talk about that and make some changes.
Okay.
So to do that, so that we can get on top of this as quickly as possible, what if we set up a schedule where we can check in at the end of every day? I think we need to sit down and talk about some of these organizational things first.
Okay.
But I'm thinking while we're working out the bugs and moving toward maybe a different model, we could meet at the end of every day, maybe the last 10 minutes of the day before you leave. You could check in with me and tell me how things are going.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, great. So the days that you're on site, you can stop by my office, and the days that you're off site, you can give me a call.
All right. So I can do it by phone too.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a plan.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Frankie.
Okay.
All right. So let's open up the phone lines and get some comments about this model and about the role play and how that works for people. Hello? Okay, so the phone lines are open. If people have comments about that role play or this model of presenting negative information. It was quite specific, and I was listening to Frankie and trying to be empathic with her situation as well. Problem-solving approach. People kind of.
Gloria, this is Liz. I do have a question. Can you give me an example of how you would transition from I really like this part, but into the negative, or however, what's a transition that you could use that doesn't really emphasize the positive to the negative?
Yeah, I had said before, don't use but.
Yeah. Is there there other words that you can recommend that?
Well, I think that using this introduction is a way of not it's not setting it up to compare it to something positive or to go off something positive. It's introducing, like it says here, how you feel about starting the discussion or what the problem is. So it's really focused on that aspect of the negative information. So as something like, I want to talk to you about this situation that's really important to me and the team, something like that just sets it up as an important discussion that we need to have. And again, not trying to give a compliment first as a strategy to move into something negative.
Okay, thanks.
Gloria, this is Roberta.
Hi.
And I got the feeling that Frankie was surprised and that there had been other meetings before, discussions, regular discussions, and I was just wondering if that was the intent, that this was just the first time that you're going to talk to her about the recruitment.
Yeah, this was really going to be a first time kind of
Okay.
thing. Yeah. Now, probably in as things go on in your site, there would be more frequent updates about that, and this may not be a surprise to the person. But things can also happen, kind of turn around quickly, and if you get to a problem sooner than later, you're able to address it and solve it, hopefully in a quicker way. So, but that's a good point.
This is Ed in Philadelphia.
Hi, Ed.
Hi. A suggestion is if there's something about the negative aspect that you're going to talk about, if it's expectable. Because what you're talking about here in this particular role play is that it's expected to have wrinkles in the firmament when you're a success.
Yeah.
So you could start off by saying, wow, we've gotten to the point where we're successful. Now we're inundated with all this stuff and starting to fall behind. So now we need to get together and rework the environment in which we're working to take it from the inception mode to the full steam ahead mode, and it's a different kind of a process that you have to work through. So if you can present something that's expectable as part of what it is that is the natural progression of events, then the person who is getting this negative feedback realizes that they're much more, they're not an outlier, they're not an oddball, they're not doing something wrong. It's just now we have to switch a little bit and do things a little bit differently.
Oh, that's a great point. Putting it in that context, I think, could be really helpful for people to hear it. And again, it's a real problem-solving approach. This is happening now because of the shift of what's going on, and we have more people to deal with, and so now we're just going to have to step things up. And I think it is a problem-solving approach that people can take in a lot better. So that's great. Now I am now recognizing that we are at 12 noon California time, 3 o'clock Eastern time. So we are going to wrap up. We had a little what do you do if you have to give difficult feedback to someone in another node and you're not the direct supervisor. Basically here we would suggest that you touch base with with the person who's the supervisor at the other node, clarify what your role is, clarify what their role is, but you really need to collaborate with the person at the other node to determine whether or not it is your role to give direct, difficult feedback to somebody at another node who you may not be supervising. We could talk about that a little bit more on the next call if people want to. But I'll just quickly give a summary that we talked about the pre-initiation tasks, tools, and tracking. We really focused a lot as a project manager, as a team leader, and the importance of team building and effective communication in the CTN. And there are lots of additional resources, some of which we've reviewed here today, that are in the toolkit on LiveLink. So join us next time on May 7th at 1 o'clock Eastern to talk about ensuring good study performance and avoiding the super manager syndrome through time management and personal boundaries. And finally, don't forget to send your avatar to ctntraining@emis.com, and we'll put those for display next time. If you have any questions about that, you can email the questions to that email address, and we will clarify for you. Anything else? All right. Bye, everybody. Talk to you next time.
Thank you, Gloria.
Thank you.
And this concludes today's workshop on site management tools and practice. We appreciate your participation. Have a wonderful day.